You probably saw the headline. The United States just seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. At first glance, it sounds like another routine sanction story. Another ship, another enforcement action, another country accusing the US of piracy. But that framing misses what actually matters. Because this wasn't about oil prices, and it wasn't about sending a message. It was about control over revenue plumbing. Here's what actually happened. In early December, U.S. authorities intercepted and seized a very large crude oil tanker called the Skipper near Venezuela's coast. The operation involved U.S. law enforcement agencies and was carried out under a federal seizure warrant, one that was about to expire. According to U.S. court documents, the tanker was carrying oil linked to sanctions-violating networks. Washington says the cargo was part of an illicit system used to move sanctioned crude, oil that Venezuela depends on for survival. Venezuela immediately condemned the seizure. Cuba called it maritime piracy. And within days, the effects showed up where this story actually lives: exports. Venezuela's oil shipments dropped sharply after the seizure. Tankers hesitated. Ports slowed. Only a small number of shipments, mostly those explicitly authorized under U.S. licenses, kept moving. That's the key. This wasn't about one ship. It was about changing behavior across the entire system. Here's the mechanism. Modern sanctions don't work by banning things outright. They work by raising uncertainty. When a tanker is seized, it sends a signal to every insurer, ship owner, port operator, and trader watching closely. Suddenly, the risk calculation changes. Ships pause. Insurance premiums jump. Crews hesitate. Buyers wait. And oil that can move doesn't. That's how you choke revenue without firing a shot. This is especially powerful against Venezuela because oil isn't just an export. It's the backbone of the state. Food imports, fuel subsidies, political survival, they all depend on oil cash. So instead of targeting the government directly, the U.S. targets the flow that keeps it alive. What makes this moment different is the method. This wasn't a new sanction announcement. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a warning. It was physical enforcement at sea. That blurs the line between financial pressure and operational power. And once that line is crossed, the consequences ripple outward. Shipping networks become more cautious. Shadow fleets become more expensive to operate. And every future tanker becomes a potential liability. That's why reactions were so strong, even from countries not directly involved. Because if one seizure can freeze an entire export system, it raises a bigger question, not just for Venezuela, but for any country whose economy depends on moving critical resources through narrow maritime channels. This is what modern pressure looks like. Not blockades, not invasions, but selective, legal, highly visible disruptions to the systems underneath global trade. So the real takeaway isn't about oil, it's about precedent. When revenue flows become enforceable choke points, power no longer comes from controlling territory, it comes from controlling movement. And the question now isn't whether this tactic works, it's where it shows up next.